Hello, my name is Ethan Groberg, and the seeking subject I chose to focus on was the different causes of apostasy, and sometimes I kind of open it up to just the idea of apostasy in general. So the first thing I did was in defining what type of doctrine this is, I classified it as a supporting doctrine because I didn't think it was necessary to our salvation to necessarily understand everything about this idea. There are certainly aspects of it that relate to core doctrines, but the causes of apostasy themselves, I thought were more just a supporting doctrine that kind of tie into some of the bigger picture ideas within the church. I also didn't think it fit very well under a policy or esoteric doctrine, just because I didn't think it really had those characteristics. It wasn't like timely, and it's not really something that's yet to be revealed. It's just more of a supporting idea. One of the source analysis that I did was a quote from Eliza R. Snow, and she was describing in the early church members who were apostatizing, and she talked about how prosperity and a lack of humility, pride, caused them to withdraw their hearts and be full of pride and hatred towards those who maintained their integrity. So I really liked this because it really delved into some of those reasons why people left the church back then. And it was a very good quote. It wasn't as unbiased as maybe it could have been, but it was contemporary, firsthand relationship to other sources, including verses in the D&C. I thought were all very good. I rated them as all green. So overall, I said that was a credible source dealing with my topic. One of the next things I did was do kind of an assumption, premise and assumption analysis. And so one of the main claims that I looked at was what the implications of apostasy are. And so for some people, they might believe that the fact that there was an apostasy means somehow that God's plan was insufficient, or that Satan overpowered him in some sort of way. And so the assumption behind that claim would be that God never intended for this to happen, that it wasn't part of his plan. And so then the explanation just kind of connects those ideas together in the sense that both can be true, right? That we can have this apostasy without it necessarily meaning that Satan is somehow more powerful than God, or that this wasn't part of God's plan. Kind of related to that, I examined some of those major and minor premises. So that first one would be, the major premise would be that God is perfect. The minor premise related to that is that God established a church through Christ while he was on the earth. And so kind of a faulty conclusion that we could arrive at with those two premises is that God's church can never be lost from the earth, which again, I kind of analyzed a little bit more and explained sort of how some of those ideas can coincide. The next skill that I focused on was the different tests and identifying some general conference talks and experiences where those tests were prevalent. And so one of them, and these ones I had to stretch a little bit to kind of connect them back to my skill, but I thought an example of for the stewardship test would be maybe a church member telling the bishop that he needed to excommunicate someone who had fallen away or apostatized from the church, versus an appropriate form of the stewardship test would be maybe a bishop counseling someone who has gone astray and helping them identify the problems and the things in their life that caused them to fall away from the church and kind of apostatize. So I thought that was just kind of a cool way to compare and contrast how in a similar situation there are differences in how we can approach helping people reconcile with causes of apostasy in their own life, and how we need to remember to stay in line with who we're telling to and who we're kind of commanding to do those things. So the next skill I focused on was interpreting scriptures. I found some verses I liked in the Book of Mormon. I'll just share one of them. This was 1 Nephi 8:23, and it talks about the mist of darkness that was causing people on the iron rod to be led astray, that they were wanted off and were lost. And kind of the personal translation that I came up with for that in my own words was something like this. I said, many of those who believe the church to be true and have the faith to begin their journey towards God's greatest blessings will be led astray by the trials that come into their lives. Confusion will abound in the last days, and many will forfeit their reward by letting go of the things they know to be true. So I really enjoyed this activity, just kind of putting some of these principles in the scriptures into my own words and kind of incorporating some of my own experiences. The next skill I did was about approaching questions with faith. And so one of the questions or concerns that people might have about this is that maybe that there wasn't an apostasy, a great apostasy like we teach, and that kind of the implications that would have being that, maybe Joseph Smith and his ministry wasn't necessary. That's kind of a common objection that I've heard a lot on my mission and since returning home even. And so I talked about how someone who had a faith and was approaching this topic with faith wouldn't be jumping to conclusions about all the implications, and they would take the time to have an open mind and look at all the resources, focusing on the ones that were most credible, and that they wouldn't shy away from controversial issues on either side of the debate, but they would take them into consideration, and that they would turn to God to try to find truth rather than turning to the opinion of man. And that would be an example of someone kind of approaching this seeking subject with an attitude of faith rather than fear. The last skill I'll talk about was narrative painting, I guess, or like narrative creation. And so obviously this one is incorporating different facts and ideas to kind of paint a narrative. And so I just kind of compared and contrasted. I did an objective one, which I thought was good, but I thought it was interesting to look at kind of the positive light and the negative light of the restoration story. And so the positive one, I just talked about how following scriptural prophecy, God's church was taken away from the earth due to unrighteousness, but in God's timing, a new prophet was raised up to restore those lost truths. God respects agency, and he allowed his children to choose their own way on earth and to suffer those consequences, but that he loves them also, and that he brought it back to bless them in their lives. And then the negative perspective was that, kind of being sarcastic here, I said, conveniently, God waited until Joe Smith wanted to get famous to restore vital truths of salvation to the earth. An uneducated boy proceeds to plagiarize the Bible and other texts in an attempt to deceive thousands. Even though God is all-powerful, he apparently was defeated by Satan, and the world fell into darkness because God could do nothing to stop them. And that millions of people lived their lives without having the opportunity to learn about God's truths. And so I liked kind of coming up with that narrative, because I think it, technically nothing I said was like completely out of the blue. Those are claims that a lot of people made, some of them even based in facts. The reality of what we believe is that millions, billions of people did live without the gospel on the earth. But when we incorporate all the facts, we understand how even that fits into God's plan, and that it's not some big gotcha moment that kind of discredits the idea of an apostasy and what some of those things that caused it might have been. So yeah, that was my seeking skill. I feel like I learned a lot this semester as I focused on that, and it was cool to try to look for those patterns and behaviors in my own life as I tried to identify some of the things that I could be doing better to avoid making those same mistakes. And that's all.